is fascinating talking to you. Now, you're proudly from New Zealand. You're a Kiwi.
Yes.
Some people around the world, maybe they're even listening tonight or today, tend to lump Australia and New Zealand together into a nice little neat colonial or Antipodean bucket. I know when we've travelled overseas, people can't distinguish the accents. Oh, you're from, and they'll go, oh, whatever. But the cultures are different. So what struck you as being different from when you came over from New Zealand and settled in Australia?
I definitely missed my Kiwi kindness, and I think that that's an oversimplified way to sum it all up. But I can tell you that wherever I go, I find my Kiwi culture. It's just a vibe that we have where I don't know, we are community minded. We that authenticity. It just seems to generate a feeling. You just know there's a smile, there's an energy. Again, not quite as individualistic. I think everything in New Zealand was smaller. Again, not oversimplifying. Whereas you got to Australia, I mean, I landed in Victoria, in Melbourne, and, you know, everything was a million miles away and everything that was that much harder to get to. And I mean, there was definitely the larrikin. The Aussie larrikin is alive and well. And I'm not suggesting that Aussies aren't kind, because I've got the most amazing friends and they are kind and compassionate and caring. And I work with the most amazing, compassionate, kind and caring people. It was just that back then, that was a few years ago. I just seemed to miss that Kiwi culture.
And when you meet Kiwis over here, they have it with them.
It's true.
Sensed it, yeah, and definitely when I've travelled over there. I know what you're saying. It's hard to put your finger on it, but it's there.
You just feel it and you connect in. Everything's easy. I don't know.
Yeah, true. So do you think it's still the same, or has it changed in the time that you've been here?
Oh, that's a good question. In my line of work, I suppose I'm wrapped in community developers, carers. So I would like to think perhaps the Kiwi influence has, infiltrated its way into mainstream Australia, whether they would admit it or not. I might get ostracised for saying these things. But I would say not as much as I would like, because they're definitely those Australians, a lot of them living in Sydney. So apologies to our Sydney podcast listeners. I know. Somebody said to me, to help clarify this, somebody said to me, and there's something special about Queensland. Queensland's a special place. I congratulate anyone who finds their way to Queensland. Melbourne, I think it's a case of what are you? So, are you a doctor? Are you a lawyer? Are you a media back? Once you get to Sydney, it's who are you? So are you a Packer? Are you a Murdoch? Are you a, Peacock? Who are you? Whereas once you get to Queensland, it's how are you? Pure and simple, how are you? Before we even worry about your heritage or your status, or we're really not interested. It's just how are you?
It is interesting how different we are just in between states. SA would be, there'd be a different vibe as well, and over in WA, well, they'd like to just secede from the Commonwealth anyway, or certainly from Australia. I don't know whether they'd be, what are you? I'm not sure.
Oh, maybe that.
Oh, yeah, and you throw daylight savings in the mix and it gets very confusing.
Oh, it does.
I miss that terribly. Miss it terribly.
Oh, one day.
Before we conclude, Liz, there's two things that I'd love for you to share. The first one is on just how times have changed over the years, particularly for women. We talk a lot about empowerment, and there are a lot of things that we take granted right now, like maternity leave and, we equal opportunities. I mean, we're still fighting for that, but there's a long way we've come, and you've got a fascinating story about...
Oh, I'm scared now.
You have a fascinating story about how, women would get fired when they got pregnant.
Yes, completely. So my mother, married, working, she hid her pregnancy from her employers because the minute that they knew you were pregnant as a woman, that was it. Your career was game over, Red Rover. Away you go home and have children. And in Brisbane, I worked for a company that my boss told me that in the 70s they loved it because it was worse than New Zealand. In Queensland, the minute you became engaged, you were sacked from your employment. So the men loved it because, of course, all of these new employees were coming through. I thought that was horrendous. I'm not quite sure who decided that that was ever going to be a good, industrial relations strategy, but it was.
It's just how it was
Wow.
done.
So the moment you became engaged, that's it, career over.
In Brisbane, absolutely. I don't know if it was all businesses, but certainly for this large organisation, that was it. Career over.
I
Career
worked
over.
I worked in the early 80s in let's say the return services organisation that we have here, and in the head office, and was asked the same question, what are your plans to have children? Because I was up for a promotion. There was only 2 secretary jobs, so it was the higher one that I was going for, and was blatantly asked by my, World War II veteran manager, what are your plans to have children? And I said, I didn't have any, and I still don't have any, so
But all those
that
things
may
that
have
they
influenced that.
can't ask now, but the things that we were subjected to.
Mm.
And I have a daughter, my husband and I have a daughter, and her gorgeous girlfriends have grown up with me saying, I'm going to pass the baton to you because guess what? The fight isn't over. Sorry to tell you, the fight continues. And when Roe v. Wade was repealed, I just said to Sarah, that's it. That's it. What I'm saying is true, that we can fight and we can change policy, we can change legislation, we can change cultures, attitudes, values. But guess what? Someone in the dark corner over there is waiting to claw it all back. All back. The fact that we're still talking about gender inequality, pay gaps. I'm curious, my curious mind, I'd love to know what is stopping us from, with all the advancements in superannuation. I used to be in the financial services industry. With all the advancements in the way superannuation is set up, what is stopping, and maybe my knowledge is wrong, but if a woman fell pregnant and went on maternity leave, how do we not split the husband's super? How is it that her superannuation contributions stop until she goes back to the workforce? Again, I'm not an expert on superannuation, but I'd love to know, could we not change that? There are definitely areas where it's financial agency. We deserve it as women. I cannot cope with the fact that women are the highest growing rate of or experience homelessness.
Yes.
That in 2023 is beyond me.
Frightening.
Absolutely beyond me. I remember being, again, financial planning and making it to the boys' club. I broke through the glass ceiling, but it was funny. I was listening to an author talk about how in the financial planning industry women made themselves invisible. And I thought, that's exactly what I did. Even though I'd broken into the boys' club, I wore the same dark suits as they did. And when I was in the room, I just blended into the background because I didn't want to remind them that I was in the room,
Oh
if
my.
that makes sense, that
Yes.
just giving up my identity was the easiest way. I was happy with acceptance. Whereas I realize now that we've moved on, there's so much in terms of wanting to make sure that the young females coming through have the space, have the confidence to continue the advocacy. It is critical that they understand. Somebody said to me, they're privileged. And I went, perhaps it's more that we haven't unpacked history for them. I remember when Obama was being inaugurated, Sarah said to me, I didn't think you were interested in American politics, Mum. Why are you watching the American president? Because for her it was normalized. For her, she didn't have that historical relevance to understand that actually that was
History.
poignant, it was significant, it was history in the making. And I said to her, okay, Rosa Parks, where do we begin? Just so
Yes.
just realizing that in the busyness of our world that I hadn't quite unpacked all that there was. There's so much acceptance for the next generation, which is wonderful. However, with that acceptance comes, I think unpacking history would be good for them.
Yes, there's a potential for complacency, isn't there? Because they don't
Yes.
know. They don't know. I saw something the other day. I think it was on the ABC Q&A program, and they had this young woman who was into the retro thing, and there's a term for it, trads or something like that. And all she wants to do is get married, wear her little 50s dresses, find a man and have babies. And it's like, what about all the bra burning? I was going, this is crazy. And other people were looking at her like, really? She was about 22 or 4 or something like that. And look, live and let live. But
Yes.
she can make those choices because she hasn't gone through a time when that was the only choice.
There was a wonderful documentary, a movie that I took Sarah and her girlfriends to see a couple of years ago, and it took them back to a time where the papers, I'm trying to think of the great name for that
Is
documentary,
it
but
Back in Time for Dinner? Was it that one?
oh no, that's Annabelle Crabbs. I'll have to think about it. But they actually had a job advert in the paper where it literally showed the positions, and it showed men's salary and girls' salary, and helping the girls understand that they couldn't apply for a credit card, they couldn't apply for a mortgage.
You knew as a
Terrible.
man, you had to have a man to get all those things done.
All of
Wow.
those things, all of those things. I think I said to you, Em, that my father's mother had a horrible experience when her husband came home and said, "Listen, I've met someone else. She's moving in. What do you want to do?" And it, and this is a woman who had a home, a husband, and 4 children. Her only option, fortunately, was she managed to secure work as a nurse, because in those days there was no single mother's pension. She had no right. She couldn't take her children. She couldn't kick her husband out. Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
We've come a long way.
Oh, we have come a long way. We have,
We've
but there's
come a
still
really long way.
there's still much more to do. But at least
Mm.
I think the more we talk about it, the more, when I think about the Me Too movement and the characters that I grew up watching on television and loving, and to realize that they were absolute monsters, I think that bringing things out of the shadow and the shame is important as well.
Mm.
It's very true.
Yeah, I read what you're sharing just reminded me of a comment. There's a woman who made a post about how growing up or society makes it seem like women are desperate for marriage, yet in actual fact it's men who benefit from marriage, so it's
Oh,
and
sorry.
women and I can understand why in the past women would be. I mean, you couldn't have anything without
Yes.
marriage, so that was a
Hmm.
means to an end. So it's interesting how times evolve but still pretty much stay the same. There's always a level of discrimination going on. There's always a learning to be done. But I think I like what you said about passing the baton. It's about making sure that we keep the lessons alive. We keep the
Hmm.
lessons alive. We keep the stories alive, because if we don't know our history, we're bound to repeat it.
Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. And there will be people who want us to repeat it. I mean, you made me think when I was in my early 20s, it was all about, are you getting engaged? When are you getting married? When are you
Mm.
buying the house? When are you having children? I don't put any of that pressure on our children.
Mm.
Women benefited from being married. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
The patriarchy.
Oh, bless their souls.
Well, Liz, this has been an absolute gem. Thank you so
Thank
much for
you.
making time to talk to us and telling us so many fascinating stories. There's definitely a lot that I'll probably just listen to again and just have a laugh. But this was great. Thank you so much for making
Thank
time
you
to
so
talk to
much.
Thank
us.
you, Liz.
Lovely
Yeah.
talking with you both. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Em.
It's
Right,
been
thank you,
delightful.
Liz.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. If you have any comments or questions about this episode, send us an email and we will explore your questions or anything that you might want to discuss. We'll explore that a little bit more. Thank you for tuning into Empowered Voices Amplified. We will see you next time.